This is Blind Ham News with stories of interest to blind and visually impaired hams. With today's report, here is Steve Bauer, W0QA.
I'm Steve, W0QA, and I am talking with Steve, AC9XS, and we're going to be talking about the accessibility of online testing. Welcome to the podcast, Steve.
Hi, thanks for having me today.
And you have been involved in a project, work with some people to make some online testing for amateur radio licenses accessible. Tell me about that.
Happy to. So this goes back to 2020 when there was an influx of people all around the world getting interested in amateur radio. The reason I actually started to get interested in it had nothing to do with what was going on at the time. I was actually listening to some old episodes of Playback Magazine back in January, I guess, of that year, which had a lot of shortwave radio reviews. And so I started going down the rabbit hole of, what is this shortwave thing? I've heard about it. Let's see what we have. And then I discovered that amateur radio operators could get on the air and talk across the world with it. And that just sounded cool. So around April, I decided, all right, what the heck? Let's try and get licensed for it. So I studied up. I took some practice exams. Then I figured, all right, great. I think I'm ready. Let's go and find an online test and call this a day. And that's where things got interesting because this was about the time where things started to shut down, and apparently there was no online testing for ham radio at all anywhere that I could find, certainly not in the United States. And in-person testing had been suspended indefinitely, and this annoyed me because it's like, all I got to do is answer these questions. I can at least get on the air, have a call sign, because that would just have been cool, having my own call letters. And I discovered, probably around the end of May, a place called hamstudy.org that had been around for a few years. They had already been working on an online testing platform. I said, awesome. Maybe this is my, if you'll pardon the pun, ticket to get in. So I checked them out and was very disappointed to find that the site had a lot of accessibility problems. And I said, well, this is the only way to go. So I'm going to schedule my test anyway, and we'll see if I can figure out a way to make this work. So I did, and I emailed the site vendor about it, and I said that your site's not accessible. I don't know if you have the expertise to fix these issues or anything like that, but this is what I do for my day job. So if you trust me, I can go in and fix them myself. And he said, okay. I mean, it was more than that, but that was the gist of it. So over the course of a few weeks, kind of after hours, I got set up with the code and started making changes to apparently 2 websites. The practice site and the online test site were 2 totally separate things. I don't know if they still are, but they were then. So I basically had to do the work twice, and in different ways. But eventually, I think this was probably close to the end of June, I got pretty much everything screen reader accessible, at least enough to where you could take the test, see what your answers were, navigate by headings and all that kind of stuff. So I said, all right, I think this is good enough to go. And he said, okay, we'll check it out. And I heard nothing. And it got to be Friday, June 29th. I remember that date because that was my exam date. And I said, hey, my exam's tonight and the changes still aren't published. He said, oh, okay. He published them 1 hour before I took my test. So that was kind of exciting and a bit nerve-wracking. So I took his word for it and I signed into Zoom. That's what the examiners used. And got set up with VoiceOver and logged into the site, and oh, look, my changes were there. So I was able to take my test. So got my tech in general that night, and a few months later I came back everything still worked, and I upgraded to Extra. So that's kind of the story.
Well, congratulations on not only getting your Extra, but making a very important site accessible.
Thank you. It's it's one of those things that a lot of stuff I've done in my life has been, well, I might as well because no one else is doing it. And I've heard over the years that those blind people who have taken the online test said that it worked. So I'm trusting that it's still accessible and they haven't broken it. But it's been a few years since I've had occasion to go visit and check it out, of course.
All right, give us the URL again.
Yep, the URL is www.hamstudy, HAMSTUDY.org. O-R-G.
Do they charge for you to take an exam on their site?
The only thing that they charge for is kind of the same fees that you would take, or you'd have to pay for in-person VE testing. So I think it was like $15 that I had to pay, but there wasn't anything extra that you had to do for it being online or through their platform.
Okay. Well, that sounds very good. Online testing. That could make it possible to take that test when you're ready, not having to wait for a VE session to be scheduled in your area.
Yep, and it works.
And the hamstudy.org website is more than just offering testing for amateur radio licenses. It's an online study resource for studying for any class of amateur radio license, whether it's tech, general, or extra. You can study material on the website, or they now have just released a new app for your smartphone. I think it's pretty impressive that Steve, AC9XS, took the bull by the horns, so to speak, and worked to make the hamstudy.org website accessible so it works with screen readers, so blind and visually impaired hams can take their tests online when they are ready. So hats off to Steve, AC9XS, our guest this time on the Blind Ham News podcast.
Have a story or information to submit for the podcast? Send it by email to blindhamnews@gmail.com or call 662-426-6397. That's 662-HAM-NEWS. Thanks for your help.
I'm Steve, W0QA, and that's the report this time. I hope you can join me again for another Blind Ham News podcast. 73, and thanks for listening.